Hi and welcome to the second introduction video to the Creme RIFM software model for fragrance exposure analysis. In this video, I'll take you through 3 examples of how you can use the software to carry out new fragrance exposure assessments, including how you can use custom exposure factors such as fragrance concentration data in these assessments. In the first example here, we will use the inbuilt and validated RIFM data to run an exposure assessment. We start by clicking the New Assessment button in the toolbar. This brings up the New Assessment wizard. There are 6 stages in the assessment wizard, and in each stage we can select the data and exposure factors relevant to our assessment. In the first stage, we can choose the demographic of interest. The software model includes validated habits and practices data for over 36,000 subjects across the EU and US. In the second stage, we can select the products and product categories which are relevant to this assessment. The software model includes data for 19 different product types, representing the vast majority of cosmetic and personal care product use. The third stage of the wizard involves the selection of fragrance concentration data. In the center of the page, the input data file is selected. For this example, we will use the default fragrance data file. On the right, the list of available fragrance compounds is shown, and we can select any number of these to be assessed. In the next stage, the body areas are selected. By default, all 18 body parts are highlighted, which will mean that exposure statistics will be calculated for each of these body parts. If you like, you can select or deselect options here using the tick boxes or by simply clicking on the image. In the next stage, we can specify some additional assessment options. We start by providing a name for the new assessment. Opening the Advanced Options section, we can specify the simulated population size. This determines the number of Monte Carlo simulations which are carried out within the probabilistic exposure algorithms. The simulations are, of course, based on real habits and practices data. The different exposure options available include dermal exposure per unit surface area and exposure per unit body weight. Exposure can be calculated for each product individually, or aggregated for each product category, or aggregated across all products. There are 2 output types available: daily average, also known as chronic exposure, and max day, also known as acute exposure. Finally, there is an option to select additional statistics and percentiles, and to select confidence intervals to be calculated for these statistics. At the final stage of the wizard, we can review the choices for input data and exposure factors that would be used in the assessment. To complete the wizard, we just need to click on the Submit button. The assessment details are now sent to the Creme cloud compute servers. These high-performance servers can efficiently analyze the large quantities of data required for these assessments. The system is capable of dealing with many assessments at the same time. This is due to Creme's patent-pending technology in cloud resource allocation. This assessment is currently queued and will start to execute in a few seconds. We can also use the Creme RIFM model to run exposure assessments on new fragrance compounds and materials, and in this next example I'll show you how easy it is to do this. We start by setting up some fragrance concentration data for this material. First, create a new fragrance table from the context menu and give the table a name. We need to add a single row in this table for every product that we want to include in the assessment. And so in this example, we add a total of 19 rows, with each row describing the concentration of the fragrance material estragol in one of the 19 product types. The fragrance concentration levels are entered in the two remaining fields. The first of these fields, labelled ingredient mixture concentration, can be used to set the concentration of the fragrance material in a fragrance mixture. This kind of data would typically be known by fragrance manufacturers. The second field, labelled mixture product concentration, is used to set the concentration of this fragrance mixture in the final product. This kind of data would be more familiar to the consumer product manufacturers. Once the data is filled into the table, we are ready to start the assessment. Click the New Assessment button again to bring up the new assessment wizard. This time, in the third stage of the wizard, we select our custom source for fragrance concentration data, and the software model populates the right-hand column with the available fragrance materials found in this data source. We now just complete the other stages of the wizard as before and click to submit the assessment. Clicking back into the My Assessments folder, we can see this second assessment has already started to execute. We can also see the current progress of the first assessment, which we set up just a few moments ago. In the final example here, we will use custom fragrance concentration data from an external source to run a new exposure assessment. Here, our custom fragrance data is saved in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. Back in the Creme RIFM software, we can use the context menu to this time select Import Fragrance Table. We then locate the Excel file on our system, provide a name for the new fragrance table, and click Create. The software will ask us to match the columns in our external table to the fields required in the Creme RIFM model, and we click Import to load the data into our new fragrance table. Now that our fragrance data is ready for use, we can set up a new assessment that uses this data. In stage 3, this time we select our custom fragrance table and select a number of fragrance materials from this table. And the rest of the wizard is the same as before. This assessment now appears in the My Assessments folder and starts to execute in parallel with the two other assessments we just set up. These three examples show a number of different ways in which you can run exposure assessments with the Creme RIFM model, including how you can analyze new or custom fragrance materials. As you can see, it is really very quick to set up a new assessment, and you can very easily run multiple assessments at the same time. This is the end of this introduction video. In the accompanying videos, you will find more information on how you can analyze the results of these assessments to determine which body areas are being highly exposed to fragrance materials and which product types contribute most to this high exposure.